Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking, well, a truly massive task. We're strapping in for an intensive, highly detailed look at Revelation chapter 17.
And this chapter is, it's one of the most intensely debated, visually striking, and prophetically critical visions in the entire Bible.
It really is. It's the divine expose on the judgment of Mystery Babylon the Great.
This is such a pivotal moment, not just in the biblical narrative, but really in understanding the spiritual history of the world. Our source material today lets us move beyond just, simple symbolism.
Yeah, it feels like we're pulling back the curtain.
We're looking at the institutionalized pattern of human rebellion that, it began at the dawn of time, was refined through history, and it all culminates in this terrifying end-time system.
And our mission today is to be thorough. We're going to go verse by verse to unpack this dense symbolic text, analyze the complex political and religious systems at play.
Dive into the deep historical and cultural roots of what we could call the Babylonian spirit.
And most importantly, pull out some clear, encouraging takeaways for believers. Now, we are approaching this from a comprehensive pre-tribulation perspective. We're seeking knowledge and discernment, not fear.
Right. We've moved past those final judgment bowls of chapter 16. So now the focus is directly on the system that made the rise of the Antichrist and all that global oppression possible. The harlot.
This is the great prophetic outline.
It is. It's the outline of the global institutionalized pattern of opposition to God. So prepare for a deep dive into the spiritual DNA of false worship.
Okay, let's get into it. Part 1, let's unpack this opening scene. The imagery is just wild, and it immediately sets this tone of imminent official judgment.
It does. The vision starts with an invitation from one of the 7 angels who, you remember, had just poured out the wrath of God.
That appointment is so crucial, isn't it? The one who is authorized to execute the judgment is now the one acting as the guide.
It is absolute confirmation of authority. John isn't just wandering into this vision. He's being given an official sealed tour of the courtroom, you could say, right before the verdict is carried out.
And the text specifies the subject immediately. The judgment of the great harlot or great prostitute.
Which right away defines her central crime. It's spiritual adultery, it's a covenant unfaithfulness, idolatry, and she's identified by where she sits upon many waters.
And those many waters, that's maybe the most crucial piece of context we get right at the start. So many prophecies use water allegorically, but here there's no guesswork.
No, the angel completely removes all doubt later in the chapter. He gives us the key to decoding her influence.
Exactly. He explicitly defines those waters later in verse 15.
And he says they represent peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So this is the essential definition for understanding the harlot's reach. She is not some local power structure.
No, she's not limited to one geographic spot.
She possesses universal global influence. She is seated upon, and so she rules, the masses of humanity across the entire world. Her authority relies on this widespread spiritual intoxication, really, the consent of the whole world system.
This global influence leads us right into her specific crime, which is detailed in verse 2, spiritual fornication.
Yes. She commits this with the kings of the earth, and she gets the inhabitants of the world drunk by the wine of her immorality.
That implies a devastatingly effective global network.
This is the core crime of idolatry, acted out on a global stage. The kings of the earth, your political and secular rulers, they've entered into these deeply corrupt alliances with her.
So she's not just selling a theology.
Not at all. She's selling influence, spiritual legitimation, power, all in exchange for purity.
Yeah.
She basically enables these leaders to rule without any moral constraint.
I think we need to linger on that phrase, the wine of her immorality, because it really defines her whole method of deception. It's not forced compliance.
No, it's intoxicating seduction. Spiritual poison, but is masquerading as something desirable.
So the world's inhabitants aren't just subjected to her power.
No, they're mentally and morally disoriented by her. They willingly drink this wine because it offers this appealing blend of, religious comfort, status, worldly power.
And it blinds them to the spiritual filth that's actually inside.
Precisely. It means the harlot's greatest weapon is glamour and deception. She makes people morally oblivious to their own sin and to her institutional corruption.
The narrative then shifts pretty dramatically. John is physically carried away in the spirit into a wilderness. So why the wilderness? Why not some lavish city where you'd expect to find her?
The wilderness is highly symbolic. In prophecy, it often signifies desolation, isolation, a place where God conducts judgment and testing.
So it's a deliberate, barren stage.
It is. It's a stage upon which the truth of the harlot, stripped of all her worldly splendor, can finally be revealed. It removes her from her context of power and luxury to show her true nature as something destined for ruin.
And there, in that desolate place, John sees the primary visual whittle, the woman, Mystery Babylon, sitting on a scarlet beast.
And this symbolic picture, the woman riding the beast, is so crucial for defining their relationship. The woman represents the apostate religious and commercial system, the spiritual authority.
And the scarlet beast, that color symbolizes both imperial power and the guilt of sin and bloodshed. So that's the political power.
It is. Specifically, it's the Antichrist's empire.
So she's riding the political power. Our sources suggest that this means the spiritual system, at least initially, is the one guiding or directing the political system. Is that right?
That's exactly right. The imagery suggests temporary control. The harlot uses the beast's coercive military and political strength to gain her global dominance. It shows this dangerous alliance between false religion and totalitarian state power.
She's using his infrastructure to spread her immorality.
Yes, but look at the beast itself. It's defined as full of blasphemous names, with 7 heads and 10 horns. This confirms it's a fully tyrannical, anti-divine power structure fundamentally opposed to God.
And the irony is that while the beast is clearly terrifying, the woman is trying to look divine. We see this powerful seduction in verses 4 through 6, starting with her royal clothes.
Oh, the visual details are absolutely key to understanding the deceit. She's dressed in purple and scarlet clothing, decked out with gold and precious gems and pearls.
All the colors of royalty, wealth, high office.
Exactly. It's designed to convey status, legitimacy, immense commercial splendor. She's a spiritual entity, but she's draped in the clothes of worldly success. This opulent facade is intentionally designed to lure anyone who prioritizes materialism over true piety. It masks the corruption.
But the truly horrifying detail is the golden cup she holds. It looks like a holy vessel.
But the contents are pure spiritual filth. It's the perfect visceral metaphor for what you could call sacramental seduction, deceptive false worship.
A golden chalice, brimming with defiling obscenities.
She's offering a religious ritual, a liturgy, a supposed communion, but instead of life, she offers spiritual death. It's a parody of Christ's true cup of blessing. It offers prestige and ritual while promoting filth, the ultimate bait and switch.
And then her true identity, the secret that defines her lineage, is branded right on her forehead.
The name is Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And that word mystery is critical. It was a divine secret, previously hidden, but now it's being disclosed through revelation.
So she's the progenitor, the ultimate source.
She's the spiritual DNA of all lesser religious, commercial, and political prostitutions throughout history. This confirms her role as the culmination and source model for every human system that has ever blended spiritual language with corrupt worldly power.
Which makes the contrast with her final actions so stark. Her clothes are beautiful, her cup is golden, but she is drunk with the blood of the saints.
Drunk with the blood of God's holy people who were witnesses for Jesus. This is profound and chilling historical summary. It signifies not just persecution, but a consistent, almost sadistic enjoyment in the martyrdom of the faithful.
So this system, which claims spiritual authority,
is actively consuming and murdering those who uphold true biblical fidelity. Persecution isn't an accident of Babylon, it's part of its very nature.
When you put all of that together, the wealth, the blasphemy, the bloodshed, John's reaction in verse 6 suddenly becomes incredibly important. He marveled with great astonishment.
John's astonishment is a powerful psychological insight. Even a seasoned prophet like John, who has seen heaven's glory, is momentarily stunned by the sheer glamour and apparent success of this evil system.
It really validates the immense spiritual danger of her deceptive allure for all of us.
It does. I mean, if John, standing in the spiritual wilderness, can be momentarily taken aback by her deceptive beauty, how much more susceptible are those living immersed within her culture?
It teaches us that evil often arrives looking beautiful, royal, and powerful, not just monstrous.
Exactly.
Okay, John's astonishment demands an explanation, and the angelic guide immediately steps in to explain these deep mysteries, focusing on the beast she rides. And this leads us directly to the profound theological riddle of the beast in verse 8.
And this is truly the key to unlocking the final political figure, the Antichrist. The angel describes the beast as the one who once was, but now is no more. And he is going to come up out of the abyss and then proceed to perdition.
It's a four-part identity that seems designed to parallel and parody the identity of Christ.
It is. Let's break down that demonic parody. Christ is the one who was and is to come. So how does the beast's identity mock that?
Well, it's a deliberate, Satan-inspired counterfeit.
It is. The was confirms he has this historical continuity, representing that long line of anti-God political power embodied in past empires. The is not suggests a temporary cessation or absence.
Which often links back to that deadly wound we read about in Revelation 13, where the beast appears to die but is then miraculously revived.
Exactly. It creates this spectacular display that just amazes the world.
And the source of his return is not earthly, which explains why the world is so amazed. He ascends out of the abyss.
And this is maybe the most significant detail. The abyssos is the bottomless pit, the realm of demonic confinement. This confirms a direct, supernatural, Satan-enabled origin.
So this isn't just an ordinary dictator rising to power.
Not at all. This is a figure energized by the demonic realm, presenting himself to the world as a resurrected or invincible leader. He's Satan's ultimate agent, a pseudo-resurrection parodying Christ's own.
And the final part of the riddle perdition confirms his ultimate fate.
Right. Perdition means absolute ruin, eternal damnation. It's the ultimate destination of the lost. So the beast's path is sealed. Though he rises with supernatural power, his end is certain, inevitable, and total.
So there's comfort hidden within the terror.
There is. The system, though powerful, has a defined expiration date marked by eternal destruction.
The world's response to this display is amazement. But verse 8 gives us a critical theological filter. It says, only those whose names were not written in the book of life will be amazed.
And this is a critical distinction for that pre-tribulation view. The dazzling display, the supernatural power, it will captivate the unregenerated world, those whose allegiance is already to the harlot system.
But those who belong to the Lamb,
they are not deceived. And this provides profound assurance that spiritual discernment isn't about intellectual prowess. It's about your eternal identity.
Now we move to one of the most complex parts of Revelation. The explanation of the beast's 7 heads in verses 9 through 11. The angel says they represent 2 things at the same time: 7 mountains and 7 kings.
The text starts with, "Here is the mind which has wisdom." It's an explicit command to think deeply. The 7 heads have this dual reference.
Let's start with the 7 mountains or hills.
That's often taken as a geographic allusion to Rome, the imperial capital when John was writing. Rome was famously built on 7 hills, symbolizing entrenched imperial authority.
The seat of the harlot's earthly power in John's day.
Right. But the 7 heads also represent 7 successive kings or kingdoms. And this is where the prophetic timeline comes into sharp focus, linking Revelation all the way back to Daniel's visions.
So the 7 kings provide the historical continuity of the spirit of the beast, that anti-God political structure.
Indeed. And the angel outlines the timeline. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come.
Okay, let's elaborate on those 5 fallen kings. Our sources tie this directly back to the greatest historical empires that have opposed God's people.
The list is generally understood chronologically. You start with Egypt, the oppression during the Exodus, then Assyria, which destroyed the northern kingdom, then Babylon.
Destruction of the southern kingdom and the exile.
Right. Then Medo-Persia, and finally Greece, with the persecution under Antiochus Epiphanes. These 5 empires embody that consistent spirit of pride, imperial worship, and persecution.
The 6th king, the one that's far less ambiguous for John's original audience.
The 6th is clearly the Roman Empire, the ruling power when John received the vision. This confirms that this historical progression of world powers forms the foundation for the final end-time system.
So Rome's imperial structure, its emperor worship, its persecution of Christians, that embodies the spirit of the beast system operating in John's own day.
Yes, and the 7th king.
The 7th is yet to come, but will reign only briefly.
This likely represents a revived, brief imperial power, or maybe a transition period right before the final world government. It's a precursor, and it quickly gives way to the ultimate manifestation of rebellion.
Which brings us to the culmination. The beast himself is designated the 8th king, but the angel says he is of the 7.
This is so profound. The beast, the Antichrist, is the final concentrated manifestation. He's the 8th king chronologically, signifying a new ultimate level of power.
But that phrase is of the 7.
It means he embodies the entire spiritual essence and political continuity of all the preceding anti-God empires. He is the ultimate summation of imperial arrogance, persecution, and human autonomy. He arises from that historical residue before going directly to perdition.
The beast may be the 8th king, but he doesn't work alone. Verses 12 through 14 introduce his political allies. The 10 kings, symbolized by the 10 horns.
These 10 horns are 10 future rulers who haven't received their kingdom yet, but they'll receive authority for a single hour, a short, defined period, along with the beast. This represents the final global political coalition that will govern the world.
And this is where we get that chilling historical connection that ties the end times all the way back to the very origins of organized human rebellion. These kings have one mind.
That phrase, the one mind, is the ideological glue of this final world government. And it is a direct, terrifying echo back to the unified rebellion at the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11.
Let's really elaborate on that Babel connection, because that's the spiritual DNA we're tracing. What made Babel's unity so offensive?
Babel was a physical expression of spiritual conformity and autonomous human ambition. They said, let us build a city and a tower. Let us make a name for ourselves. It was centralized, totalitarian ambition.
And they rejected God's command to scatter and multiply.
Exactly. The one mind of the beast's coalition replicates this perfectly. Global unity, shared purpose, pooled power, all of it directed against divine authority. They replace divine law with human consensus, driven by demonic coercion.
But despite this overwhelming, globally unified conspiracy, the outcome is stated plainly in verse 14. They will make war with the Lamb.
But the Lamb will defeat them. This is the ultimate, unshakable assurance that grounds all the terror. The Lamb, Jesus Christ, will overcome them because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings.
He is the rightful authority. His victory is guaranteed.
And the text specifies who shares in this victory. Those with him are called the called, chosen, and faithful ones. This confirms that even in the face of the ultimate global alliance against truth, Christ's followers are secure.
Okay, so we've seen the final manifestation in the harlot and beast. Now let's dive into part 3 and really trace the history and spiritual DNA of this harlot. Our source material is insistent. She's not just one city like Rome. She's a composite system.
That's the key distinction. Babylon is an allegorical figure representing this recurring human pattern of idolatrous syncretism, the blending of truth with error, power, and commerce.
So she incorporates the literal pride of Babylon, the imperialism of Rome,
the sensuality of Canaanite cults, and just that pervasive human tendency to create a self-glorifying system independent of God.
So what are her core cultural features across history? What always characterizes the spirit of Babylon?
4 things are always present. 1, syncretistic religion mixing truth with paganism. 2, economic exploitation using global trade for opulent luxury. 3, political alliance with oppressive power, that's the riding the beast part. And 4, the consistent defining trait, persecution of holiness.
Being drunk on the blood of the martyrs.
Exactly. And the prophetic metaphor for all this is harlotry, spiritual adultery.
So, if she's the mother of harlots, the lineage of this spiritual DNA must begin with the very first act of false worship in Genesis. Where does this pattern of self-worship start?
It begins with individual self-exaltation, and you trace it all the way back to Cain in Genesis 4. Cain established the line of counter-worship.
With his offering.
Yes. He brought the fruit of his own labor, a man-centered effort based on self-justification, rather than the divinely commanded blood sacrifice. That fundamental choice, man's works over God's prescribed redemption, is the spiritual foundation of all false religion.
And Cain's story quickly links that false worship to the harlot's other defining characteristic, persecution.
Exactly. When God rejected his offering, what did Cain do? He murdered his brother Abel. This shows that self-justification and man-centered religion quickly lead to the violent suppression of true faith.
So persecution is baked into her DNA from the start.
It is. And then Cain goes on to build the first city mentioned after the fall, establishing the first worldly system independent of God's rule. It's a precursor to Babylon.
This moves us from the individual rebellion of Cain to the first corporate global expression, the true archetype of Mystery Babylon, the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11.
Babel is foundational. It was a unified corporate project built with the intention of centralization and autonomy. Nimrod, the empire builder, centralized human ambition.
Their ambition was sociological, spiritual, and architectural.
It was. They were building an ecumenical ziggurat, a centralized place of occult power and worship that sought to unify humanity against God's command to scatter.
So this attempt at centralized global power, united by one language and one purpose.
That is the spirit of Babylon, centralized, proud, and defiant. This one mind that God scattered is the exact ambition the beast's 10 kings replicate perfectly in Revelation 17.
Yeah.
Spirit of Babel is globalism without God.
And as that spirit spread, it corrupted true faith, particularly in Israel, through practices that Revelation would eventually call abominations.
That's perfectly illustrated by the high places and groves throughout the Old Testament. These were Canaanite altars and sacred Asherah poles, where Israel tried to mix the worship of Yahweh with sensual, fertility-based idolatry.
The Baal and Asherah cults.
Right. This chronic sin of spiritual adulteration, blending devotion to God with devotion to self or sensuality, is exactly what the prophets called spiritual harlotry.
So, when John sees the harlot as the mother of all these abominations, he's seeing the final cumulative expression of Cain's self-justification, Babel's unified pride, and the OT's syncretistic harlotry.
Precisely. Mystery Babylon is the culmination of all these diverse historical forms of false worship. Whether it was Gnosticism in the early church or modern secular humanism that uses religious language for political ends, it all flows from the same mother.
Let's quickly confirm the rich theological metaphors woven throughout this vision. The symbolism is the language of prophecy.
It's intentionally dense and powerful. Harlotry is the consistent prophetic allegory for covenant breach. The woman on the beast is the allegory showing apostate religion using the state for leverage. The golden cup is the potent metaphor for seductive deception.
Outward glamour masking spiritual filth.
Exactly. And Babylon the Great itself is a typology. It represents every single worldly system, historical or future, that has opposed God and persecuted his people.
Okay, moving into part 4, this is where Revelation 17 demands a multidimensional analysis. It's not enough to trace the history. We need to understand how this global deception works today. Let's start with the theological cornerstone.
Theologically, the whole chapter reinforces divine sovereignty. God ordains the timing and bounds of rebellion. He allows the beast and the harlot to rise, but their power is always finite.
It only exists until the words of God shall be fulfilled.
Right. And this provides an absolute assurance of God's ultimate justice against institutionalized apostasy.
Spiritually, this chapter is a razor-sharp exposure of idolatry disguised as acceptable culture or commerce.
It clarifies the essential spiritual conflict. The ultimate struggle is between the purity of the Lamb's bride committed solely to one Savior and the spiritual adultery of the harlot who offers compromise.
She offers the appearance of spirituality without the requirement of genuine repentance or purity.
Exactly. And psychologically, her power is in her ability to seduce and blind. Just look at John's astonishment.
So what fuels the effectiveness of her glamour?
Well, the harlot thrives on our human susceptibility to status, comfort, and groupthink. Psychologically, she offers the illusion of identity and security within a powerful system.
People trade their conscience for convenience.
They do. And that one mind that unites the beast's coalition is a perfect example of collective psychological delusion, where ideological conformity justifies complicity.
And socially, Babylon's influence relies completely on networks of corruption and dependency.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Her power rests on 3 corrupt networks: political leverage, economic dependency, and cultural soft power, that intoxicating wine.
She's described in verse 18 as the great city that reigns over the kings of the earth,
which signifies a centrally influential power center, a political and economic vortex. Her eventual fall will cause seismic social and commercial collapse, as we see in the next chapter.
Now, we need to bridge this gap and bring this profound prophetic picture into modern context. I mean, we are living in a time of intense globalization and digital centralization. How does the spirit of Babylon resonate with us today?
The text is profoundly relevant because the spirit of the harlot is already operational. It's testing us with the shadows of the final system, preparing the world for it. Revelation 17 is the discernment tool we need.
So for us as individuals and families, how do we identify the harlot spirit creeping into our lives?
It manifests as the constant temptation toward materialistic idolatry. It's any theology, conscious or subconscious, that prioritizes personal wealth, comfort, or status. The purple and scarlet and gold over moral purity.
It's that little voice that whispers, compromise is acceptable if it advances your career or status.
That's it. Families have to actively root their identity in the Lamb to resist this cultural seduction. Spiritual fornication today often looks like the idolization of consumerism or success within a religious framework.
And culturally, we see this massive pressure toward unity and tolerance, but often at the expense of distinctiveness.
This points directly to warnings against syncretistic spirituality. This is the blending of secular ambitions with religious language, seeking global consensus above biblical truth. Any growing global trend toward unity that mirrors Babel's ambition by operating apart from Christ is functioning under the spirit of Babylon.
And finally, at a national and international level.
It's a stark reminder of divine accountability. Any nation or global institution that sacralizes itself, that blends political power with a corrupt religious framework demanding ultimate loyalty, is positioning itself for judgment.
So now we have to look beyond the visible components and recognize that Revelation 17 describes a battle that is fundamentally spiritual. Let's analyze the unseen forces driving this final system.
The entire system is supernaturally energized. This is not just a human crisis. The dragon, Satan, empowers the beast, and the beast ascends directly from the abyss. This confirms the final political religious system is not just human ambition run amok.
It's influenced and manipulated by organized forces from the demonic realm.
It is a literal power structure infused with abyssal energy.
So the beast is Satan's agent, and the harlot is his spiritual strategy for global worship. What's the overarching demonic objective?
The core goal is twofold: achieving global worship and the total suppression of fidelity to Christ. They use great signs and wonders to deceive rulers and secure that global allegiance.
But the angelic guide signals that even this conflict is subject to God's adjudication.
Absolutely. The persecution of the saints is witnessed in heaven, and vindication is assured.
Now we get to the shocking climax, this moment of self-destruction in verses 16 and 17. The political powers the harlot rode and seduced, the 10 horns and the beast, they turn on her. This seems like a massive failure of the demonic strategy.
It is the ultimate divine irony. The political beast, having used the religious system to consolidate its power, eventually hates her. False religion, having served its purpose, becomes an obstacle.
And they turn on her violently.
They do. They strip her naked, eat her flesh, and burn her remains with fire. It's total, humiliating desolation. It symbolizes the secular, totalitarian power consuming the false religious system that helped put it in place.
And they turn on her because the beast demands singular worship, and the harlot, even in her apostasy, still retains some competing religious authority.
Precisely. Once the beast feels secure, any religious competitor is intolerable. The false church must be devoured by the state. But verse 17 tells us this self-destruction isn't just political infighting, it's entirely orchestrated by heaven.
This is the critical piece of the puzzle, for God has put a plan into their minds, a plan that will carry out his purposes.
It reveals God's ultimate sovereignty over evil choices. God uses the enemy's internal wickedness, the hatred and power struggle between the beast and the harlot, to execute his own righteous judgment.
So they mutually agree to give their authority to the scarlet beast, but they are unknowingly fulfilling God's predetermined word.
Yes. Even the greatest conspiracy in history operates strictly within the confines of God's decree. They execute God's plan while pursuing their own wicked desires.
This brings us to the most vital part of our deep dive. The encouragement and help this seemingly terrifying chapter offers to believers in Jesus Christ, especially those who hold a pre-tribulation view.
The message is overwhelming assurance. First, Revelation 17 provides absolute clarity in discernment. The vision exposes the true nature of the false system. For believers today, this clarity helps us identify compromise and spiritual danger in our own culture.
We know the enemy's playbook.
We do. And for those who have suffered or who witness global injustice today,
There's deep assurance of justice.
the harlot's temporary glamour is exposed as utter filth, and her judgment is certain and total. This provides profound comfort in the knowledge that moral order will be restored.
The knowledge that God remains in full control over the entire sequence of global chaos has to be the anchor for faith.
Absolutely. The truth that this vast conspiratorial one mind of the beast operates strictly within God's bounds, that he puts the plan into their hearts, assures believers that he is always in charge. There is no rogue operation outside his providence.
And finally, the triumph of those who hold fast to Christ.
The ultimate victory belongs to the Lamb. He will triumph over them because he is Lord over all lords and King over all kings. And critically, believers are defined not by worldly success, but by their eternal identity. They are called, chosen, and faithful.
For the pre-tribulation believer, the harlot's destruction serves as a powerful reminder.
It does. It reminds us that the true church, the bride, is securely removed, awaiting the glorious return with the King, witnessing this final separation between the corrupt system and the pure, triumphant saints. Our hope is based on Christ's certain victory, not the shifting sands of world power.
This has been an incredibly detailed and, at times, a pretty sobering deep dive into Revelation 17. But the encouragement found in the Lamb's ultimate victory and the clarity of the harlot's exposure is profound.
It is. This chapter forces us to scrutinize our spiritual allegiance. Are we aligning ourselves with the deceptive, temporary splendor of the harlot, the pursuit of gold, status, and power through compromise, or with the enduring, pure, and triumphant identity of the true bride of Christ?
Our final provocative thought for you to carry forward is this. The spiritual reality revealed in Revelation 17 is that the most dangerous opposition often comes not from obvious, overt tyranny, but from systems that successfully cloak corruption, power, and materialism in the beautiful garments of religion and worldly luxury.
So the question for us is, how vigilant must we be today to ensure our spiritual discernment is sharp, our priorities are pure, and our allegiance is solely to the purity of the Lamb?
And not the seductive gold and scarlet of the harlot.
May this knowledge strengthen your resolve and reinforce your faith that the word of God concerning judgment and victory will be perfectly fulfilled. The judgment of the harlot ensures that final, eternal separation between the corrupt global system and the pure church.
Thank you for embarking on this deep dive with us today. The knowledge gained here is your essential tool for spiritual vigilance.
Until next time, remain called, chosen, and faithful.